So today I would like to discuss with you the politics of Uber and Lyft drivers and the shared economy in general. So what is the sharing economy? The sharing economy is a different style of an exchange of goods and resources where instead of hiring employees who provide a service or a good, um, we rely on each other. So by sharing, we rely on each other by sharing the things we already have. So the way we think about this typically is with things like Airbnb, Lyft, and Uber. So with Lyft and Uber, we share our cars. I drive a car. If I sign up to drive with Lyft or Uber, I jump through whatever hoops those companies have, and then I become a Lyft or Uber driver, and I start sharing my car with people and giving people rides from one place to another in exchange for cash. I get I get a cut of whatever the fare is. So I don't actually drive for Lyft or Uber, but pretty much anyone can do it, given a clean driving record and a car that meets their standards. So you're sharing your car and making money driving people around. With Airbnb, that's sharing your home or a room you have, or even you can rent out your couch, so you don't even have to give somebody a whole room. You can say on Airbnb, 25 bucks a night, you can crash on my couch. And so you're sharing your living space with people. So that's what we think of when we think of the sharing economy. Now, the interesting thing about these companies is that these startups often operate at a severe loss for the first how many ever years of their existence. So um, Uber, for example, Uber and Lyft are both operating at a loss as of 2019, and they both recently went public on the stock market, and they're valued very high, and they have a lot of investors. But Uber is losing currently like billions of dollars a year, and it begs the question: well, how is that possible? There's so many Uber drivers. The drivers themselves recently just got their pay cut on how much of the fares they get for driving with Uber, and well, the thing is they have to undercut their competition, and originally their competition would be taxis. So they have to undercut the competition by providing low fares, and Uber and Lyft are in this price war where they just keep both dropping their prices to try and make sure they're the cheapest. Personally, in my experience, Lyft has been cheaper whenever I'm trying to ride someplace around here. Uh, and Lyft and Uber are wildly convenient services. I don't take a taxi as often as I would take a Lyft or an Uber. It's just very easy. You download the app, you log in, you link it to a credit card, somebody comes and picks you up. You can tip them right on the app. It's a very nice system, but the whole operation is to try and undercut their competition, which is their direct competition would be like taxis or public transportation. So um, Uber is also expanding into other areas, though. They're actually even investing into self-driving cars. So right now, investors are thinking, well, yes, it's operating at a loss, but with Uber Eats and investment into self-driving cars and the different ways they're diversifying their services, ultimately they will make money. And so Uber has to rely on getting more investors to be okay with investing money in a product that's losing money for so long in the hopes that it eventually will become profitable. This is something that's interesting to me when it comes to business in America, because these startups with high dollar funders can afford to operate at a loss for a number of years. And my parents were small business owners, and you couldn't operate at a loss and stay in business. That's how it worked. But things are a little bit different when you have this kind of business model. So one of the things that I find really interesting about this is that these companies, and I'll focus mostly on Lyft and Uber, are operating at a loss right now, even though they have cheap labor. So the app allows you to tip, which is generally, in most people's minds, a good thing. But that shifts the pay burden over to the rider, and not the company itself. They still get a percentage of the fare, but um, the 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 drivers for Lyft and Uber are not considered employees. They're considered contractors. And if they're independent contractors, then Lyft and Uber don't have to treat them like employees. They don't have to provide any kind of health care benefits. They don't have to provide other things that employers would usually have to provide. So what ends up happening is they have cheaper labor than, say, the taxis. The taxi companies have to actually pay for health insurance and other types of benefits that the Uber and Lyft companies don't have to, which makes you wonder, when are they going to be profitable if you're already relying on cheap labor that aren't considered workers? If the Department of Labor decided to consider them workers, then it's estimated that Uber and Lyft would the price of their labor force would go up by 20 or 30%, and that would be a huge hit against them for companies that are already running at large losses at the moment. So it's a really interesting situation as to when it comes to labor in America, who is a worker and who isn't. And right now, Lyft and Uber drivers are independent contractors, and that actually is such an interesting topic, because this is like the textbook type of thing. The sharing economy is not something you're supposed to be doing full time. That's what Uber and Lyft would argue, at least, right? They would argue, look, this is not your full time employment. You're supposed to be sharing your car. This is to make extra money on the side, not to pay the bills. However, there are people who are trying to get by driving Uber or Lyft full time, and I'm thankful that I am not in that situation myself, but because that must be tough. But then these people are having a tough time paying their bills, while also working quite a bit using the services or for the services of Lyft and Uber. So it kind of brings up the question, who's a worker and who's not, and what responsibilities do Lyft and Uber have toward paying a reasonable wage to the people that drive for them. So another interesting component to that is that Uber drivers actually recently went on strike in a few major cities, and it's interesting what that actually looks like, because they don't punch a clock. They log into their app at whenever they feel like it, and they log out whenever they feel like it. They work on their own schedule, and so they went on strike when Uber went public, and there were a lot of demonstrations, but there were also a lot of people still driving at that time. News broadcast showed that you could still get on your phone and get an Uber even during the strike. So how effective that really is as a demonstration, they didn't particularly do a wonderful job of keeping people from logging in that day, because the only way strikes work and the only way that labor unrest works in the advantage of the workers is if they have solidarity, is if everybody doesn't log in and no one can get a ride. But if you're having a strike and you can still catch a Lyft or an Uber within minutes, then that kind of defeats the purpose of the strike, which is to get people to notice that you're not providing a valuable service that they usually get. Um, Trying to make them understand how important what you do is. So it's a fascinating topic, and one that will actually be fought in the courts, and will change as the Department of Labor changes and as administrations change. And it will be interesting to see in the future if there's ever a shift in the sharing economy from viewing Lyft and Uber drivers as independent contractors or as workers.